I never expected her to remember my name, let alone everything else. It started on a Thursday morning, the kind that felt like it had been repeated 100 times already. Same small coffee shop, same half-burnt smell from the espresso machine, same quiet corner I pretended was my spot. I came to study, or at least pretend to, but mostly I just sat there scrolling through old messages I never sent. I was stirring my coffee when I heard her voice. "Morning, kid." I looked up. Her, my friend Amir's mom. Sarah, mid-40s, soft hair tied up like she did it in the car, jacket half-zipped, fingers curled around a thermos she probably brought from home. She didn't belong in a place this cramped, but somehow she fit perfectly. "You're early," she said, sliding into the seat across from me like she was checking if it was okay. I nodded, pretending I was used to seeing her here. I wasn't. Had work canceled last minute, I said. She raised an eyebrow. "Must be nice." "It's not. They don't pay me for canceled shifts." She smiled, but in that apologetic way older adults do when they realize life is still allowed to be unfair to young people. Her thumb tapped the side of her thermos. My eyes flicked toward her hand. Small habit now, watching how she held things. She caught me looking and laughed under her breath. "What? You checking if I actually drink from this old thing?" "Just noticing," I said, shrugging. There was a pause. One of those quiet ones that could go either comforting or awkward. She leaned back slightly, studying me with a softer expression than last time. "Your hair's longer," she said. "Oh, yeah." I touched it without meaning to. Didn't think anyone would notice. "I noticed things," she said. It should have sounded ordinary. It didn't. She asked about classes, about whether I was still doing delivery work on weekends, about that book she saw me reading months ago. I kept waiting for her to forget a detail, but she didn't. Not one. At one point, she reached for my napkin, without thinking, and started folding the corner between her fingers. Just a small crease. Two, actually. Like she needed her hands busy. She realized it a second later and let go, pretending it was accidental. "You always sit alone?" she asked. "I guess," I said. "Everyone's busy." She nodded slowly, eyes lowering like she understood something I wasn't saying. I wondered if she noticed how many unsent messages cluttered my phone, half-written texts to people I stopped trying with. "Lonely mornings aren't the worst," she said. "They're just quiet." She said quiet, like it held weight. I wanted to ask why she came here today, whether she planned to, whether she'd been hoping to see me the same way I secretly hoped to see her. Instead, I said, "Your jacket's on inside out." She froze, looked down, and laughed. Genuine, surprised, almost a little embarrassed. A light flush hit her cheeks as she fixed the collar. "God, don't tell Amir," she said. "I won't." Something shifted then, nothing dramatic, just a tiny realignment, like we'd stepped half a degree closer to each other without moving at all. She checked her phone. Her thumb hovered over the screen, not tapping, not deciding. "I should go," she said, standing up. "But hey." I looked up at her. "It's hard to act normal around you sometimes." She said it so quietly I nearly thought I imagined it. She didn't wait for a reaction, just gave a small smile, the kind that hides something, and walked out. My phone buzzed a minute later. A message from an unknown number. Didn't get to say something earlier. "Can we talk tonight?" I stared at it long enough for my coffee to go cold, and I honestly couldn't tell if this was the beginning of something or the beginning of losing something I never actually had. Didn't reply to her message right away. I stared at my phone until the screen dimmed, turned it face down, turned it back over. I typed, erased, typed again. Eventually, I sent something simple. "I'm home. If you want to talk." She didn't answer. Not for an hour. Not for two. By the time I heard the knock on my door, I had convinced myself it wasn't coming. She stood in the hallway, hair pulled down now, jacket replaced by a thin sweater that looked too soft for late evening. She held a small paper bag in her hand. Tea packets, I guessed. She looked unsure, almost nervous. "Sorry," she said. "I didn't want to text the wrong thing." "You could never," I said before thinking. Her eyes flicked up, meeting mine too directly for a second. She stepped inside. I put water to boil, mostly to have something to do with my hands. She walked around my small living room, touching nothing but noticing everything. The books stacked horizontally because the shelf was too short. The half-finished sketch on the table. The mug with a chipped rim. You kept drawing, she said, running a finger near the sketch but not on it. Amir said you stopped last year. Yeah. Started again. I shrugged. Didn't think anyone would care. I care, she said softly. We sat with our tea. Hers chamomile, mine something mint. It didn't matter. What mattered was how close she sat on the couch. Not touching but near enough that I could feel the warmth of her sleeve whenever she shifted. She exhaled slowly. I shouldn't be here. I know. We didn't move. She sipped her tea, eyes drifting toward the window. I used to come here with Amir when he was little. To drop off something for your mom. You were always drawing superheroes on scrap paper. She smiled faintly. You'd hide them when I walked in. I felt heat rise to my face. They were terrible. They were honest, she said. Kids draw what they want to be. It sounded like she was speaking about more than sketches. I asked, why did you come tonight? She ran a finger around the rim of her mug, a slow, absent motion. Because it's been a long time since I talked to someone who actually listens. She paused. And because it scares me how easy it is with you. The kettle's residual warmth clicked as it cooled. She didn't look at me, but her shoulders had that barely there tension, like she was bracing for judgment. You're my friend's mom, I said quietly. I know. You're divorced. I know. I'm not sure what we're doing. She smiled at her tea instead of me. Me neither. Silence settled. Not empty, not heavy. Just full. She reached for something on the table, my pencil, and without asking, she drew a small, simple line next to my sketch. Barely anything. Just a mark. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. I thought, watching her hand. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. She set the pencil down gently and touched my wrist. Not a hold. Just a light press of her fingertips, warm and careful. A gesture small enough to ignore, but impossible to forget. I didn't reply to her message right away. I kept staring at it, imagining all the ways it could be harmless, or not harmless at all. By the time evening came, I was pacing my apartment like someone waiting for exam results. At 9:14 p.m., another text. I'm outside for a minute. If you're free. I don't know why my heart jumped. She was just my friend's mom. A divorced woman in her 40s. Someone who should have been a polite hello in passing, not whatever this was. I stepped outside. She was leaning against her car, arms crossed, hair slightly wind-messy like she'd rushed out without thinking. The streetlight softened everything about her. You came, she said, surprised, like she expected me not to. You texted. She smiled at that, small and tired. I couldn't stop thinking about this morning. Because your jacket was inside out. She laughed. That too. There was a silence, but not the uncomfortable kind. Her gaze drifted toward my hands, then away. Like she was checking for something. Nervousness, maybe. I had a rough day, she admitted. Work. Life. Just too much noise. And I'm what? Quiet. I said. Her lips pressed together, not denying it. You're easy to be around, she said softly. My chest tightened at that. It was too honest, too unpracticed. She shifted, tapping her finger along the ridge of her car door, her version of a nervous tick. Can I tell you something without it sounding weird? She asked. I nodded. When you were younger, when you used to come over with Amir, you were this shy kid hiding behind a hoodie. She smiled, remembering. Now you're not that kid anymore. And sometimes I forget I'm not supposed to forget that. I swallowed hard. That was the first time she'd acknowledged the thin, dangerous line between us. You okay? She asked, noticing the way I looked down at my shoes. I just don't know what this is. Neither do I, she said. But I know it's something. She opened the car door, paused, then reached inside and pulled out a small thermos, the same old metal one she always carried. I made tea. Could use some company while drinking it. Tea wasn't the point. Sitting with her wasn't the point. It was the fact that she asked. We sat on the curb, passing the thermos back and forth. The tea was too sweet, but warm. Our shoulders didn't touch, but they hovered close enough that I could feel her presence like heat. At one moment, she brushed a stray leaf off my sleeve. Just a tiny gesture, but it landed deeper than it should have. Later, when she stood to leave, She looked at me a little too long before saying goodnight. And the thought hit me unexpectedly. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. Part 3. Heightening Suspense. 500 words. Male POV. The next few days felt like walking around with a quiet secret no one else could see. Every time my phone buzzed, I wondered if it was her. Sometimes it was. Sometimes it wasn't. The not knowing did something to me. On Tuesday, I went to the coffee shop again. Not intentionally, or at least that's what I told myself. She wasn't there. I felt stupid for expecting her. I ordered my drink and sat down. 10 minutes later, she walked in. She froze when she saw me. Just half a second, but enough. Like she was debating whether to stay. She stayed. "Morning," she said, more careful than usual. "You okay?" I asked, noticing she wasn't wearing makeup, her hair tied in a looser knot. "Just tired." She rubbed her temple. "Didn't sleep great." I hesitated. "Because of—" She cut in quickly. "No. Well, maybe. I don't know." She sat across from me but kept her hands clasped together on the table, as if she was preventing herself from reaching across it. There was something between us now. Something fragile and unspoken. Before either of us could fill the silence, the door jingled. Amir walked in. My stomach dropped. He didn't see us at first. When he did, he looked confused. "Mom? What are you doing here?" "I grabbed coffee before work," she said quickly. Too quickly. "And him?" Amir pointed at me. "We ran into each other," she added, eyes avoiding mine. I nodded stiffly. "Yeah, just coincidence." Amir shrugged and went to order, but his expression lingered a second too long on the space between us. When he turned away, she exhaled, long, controlled, like she'd been holding her breath. "That's why this is complicated," she whispered. "I know. You're his friend. I know. And I know that too." We both fell silent. She reached for her cup, but her hand shook slightly. When she steadied it, she kept her gaze locked on the table, not me. "You should probably pull back," she said finally. My chest tightened. "Is that what you want?" She didn't answer. Not right away. Instead, she looked up slowly, eyes tired, conflicted, almost apologetic. "I don't know what I want," she admitted. That's the problem. The room felt too small then. Too bright. Too full of other people. She stood abruptly. "I have to go?" I shouldn't have stayed. When she walked past me, her hand brushed my arm. Light, almost accidental, but not really. Her fingers lingered just a fraction too long. I turned. "Sarah." She stopped in the doorway but didn't look back. For a breath, it felt like she might return, like the distance between us might collapse into something reckless, something undeniable. Then she whispered, barely audible, "Don't make this harder." And she left before I could cross that final inch. But the way her fingers had trembled against my arm, that felt like a line we almost crossed without meaning to. Almost. I didn't reply to her message right away. I kept opening the chat, staring at it, closing it again. Eventually, I sent a simple sure. Nothing else. She told me to come by her place. Back door. Easier, she'd said. And that alone made my stomach tighten. I walked over after sunset. Her porch light was on but faint, like she didn't want the neighbors noticing anything. She opened the door before I even knocked. "Hey," she said, voice softer than this morning's. I made tea. Her living room looked lived in a warm, cluttered way. A half-finished puzzle on the table. A jacket draped over the couch. She motioned for me to sit, and when I did, she handed me a mug that was far too hot. I held it anyway. For a few minutes, we sat in the kind of silence where two people are pretending they're not listening to each other breathe. She spoke first. "You know, I used to come here at night when Amir was little. Same tea, same couch." She stared at the mug. It was quiet then too, but a different kind of quiet. I didn't push. She didn't know me her past, but she kept talking, maybe because she needed to. When his dad started traveling more, it was just me in this house. The nights felt longer. I'd hear the fridge hum like it was complaining. She laughed once, lightly. "Small things stay with you." I understood more than I wanted to admit. "You ever get used to the quiet?" She glanced at me. "You don't. You just learn how to sit in it without falling apart." Her honesty hit a place I usually keep locked. I didn't tell her about the nights I'd lie awake refreshing old chats just to see the last seen timestamp change, or the way I sometimes talked aloud to nobody, just to hear a voice. Instead, I said, I think that's why I go to the cafe. Makes me feel part of something. She hummed, nodding slowly. The kind of nod that said she knew exactly what I meant. You're young, she said. You shouldn't feel that already. I do. Her eyes flicked up to meet mine. A tiny flinch of guilt crossed her face, so quick I almost missed it. That's what makes this tricky, she murmured. You being who you are. Me being who I am. There it was, the thing neither of us said. She was my friend's mom. A divorced woman trying to stay composed. A responsible adult. Not someone who should sit this close to me. But she didn't move away. At some point our hands brushed on the couch cushion. Barely a touch, a single accidental second. But she didn't pull back until a beat too late. I don't know why that moment in the cafe stayed with me, I said quietly. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. Her breath caught. Not loud, just there. And she placed the tea aside, like her hands needed to be free for whatever came next. White heavy checkmark part 3, heightening suspense, 500 words. Male POV things didn't settle after that night. If anything, they sharpened. For 2 days, she didn't text. Not even an emoji. I saw her car come and go, saw her curtains shift at odd hours, but she stayed silent. I told myself she was busy. I told myself it didn't matter. It mattered. On the third afternoon, I ran into her outside her house. She had grocery bags looped over her arms, keys dangling from her fingers. Her hair was messy, like she'd been rushing. Hey, I said. She looked up too quickly. Oh, hi. Just that. Oh, and I knew she'd been thinking about me. Avoiding me, maybe. Need help? I asked. She hesitated. Only for a second. Sure. Inside, I placed the bags on her counter. She stood opposite me, hands flat on the surface, breathing a little unevenly. You've been distant, I said. She closed her eyes for a brief second, then sighed. I've been trying to be. That stung. Probably showed on my face because she winced. It's not you, she said quickly. It's just, people notice things. They always do. Who noticed? She didn't answer. Instead, she reached for a box of tea, but her hand shook slightly. I stepped forward without thinking, steadying the box before it slipped. Our fingers brushed again. Longer this time. She didn't pull away first. You're making this hard, she whispered. I'm not doing anything. That's exactly it. Silence stretched. Not comfortable. Not hostile. Just full. Her phone buzzed. She checked it. A message from Amir appeared briefly before she locked the screen. My chest tightened. Of course. That complication had always been there, waiting. You should go, she said softly. But she didn't move aside. She stood right in front of me, breathing slow, eyes flicking to my mouth once, so fast I questioned if I imagined it. I stepped back first. She swallowed, like relief and disappointment hit her at the same time. Listen, I said. Tell me if you want me gone. That's not it. Then what is it? She opened her mouth. Closed it. Tried again. I don't trust myself around you sometimes. A whisper. Barely sound. The air changed. A storm without thunder. We stood there, inches apart, two people who should have stepped away 5 minutes ago. I didn't touch her. But my hand lifted. Half a movement, a near admission. She mirrored me unconsciously, her fingers twitching like she was about to take my wrist. Then the front door rattled. Someone walked past outside. Footsteps. Too close. We froze. And in that tiny frozen moment, she leaned in. Not all the way, not enough to cross the line, but enough that her breath hit my cheek, and I felt the shape of the kiss she didn't give. Go, she murmured. Please. Her voice cracked on the last word. White heavy checkmark part 4. Nearing the climax. 500 words. Male POV after that almost moment. Something in me kept replaying it, like a scene I wasn't sure I actually lived. Days passed with an odd rhythm. One of us appearing just as the other disappeared. Little coincidences that felt like avoidance disguised as chance. The breaking point came on a quiet evening. I was sitting on the curb outside her house, pretending to fix something on my bike, when she stepped out with a bag of recycling. She didn't see me at first. She stopped halfway down the driveway, the sunset behind her turning her silhouette soft. She looked tired. Or thoughtful. I couldn't tell which. When she noticed me, she froze for half a breath. Then she said, "Thought you were working today." They cut my hours again. She exhaled through her nose. "I'm sorry. It's fine." It wasn't, but I didn't want pity. I stood, brushing dirt from my hands. She watched the gesture with an expression I didn't understand. Some mix of worry and something heavier. We walked her recycling to the curb together. It should have been nothing. One of those everyday tasks you forget by morning. But she paused beside the bins, arms folded, her voice low. "I keep thinking about the other day," she said. My chest tightened. "Me too." "It scared me," she admitted. Her eyes stayed on the pavement. "Because I'm supposed to know better. And I do. But knowing doesn't stop anything." A quiet confession in the open air. I swallowed. "It scared me too." "Why?" she asked softly. "Because it didn't feel wrong." That made her look at me. Really look. Her face softened, but her jaw tightened like she was fighting with herself. We walked back slowly, neither speaking. The street was empty except for the sound of our shoes on asphalt. At her porch steps, she stopped again. "You remind me of when I used to feel." She cut herself off, shaking her head. "Never mind." "Feel what?" She hesitated, then sat on the steps. I sat beside her, leaving a polite amount of space that didn't feel polite. "When I was younger," she said, "I used to believe connection was simple. Two people liked each other, and that was enough." She traced a finger along the edge of the wooden step. "Life teaches you it's not. Maybe it doesn't have to be complicated. You're saying that because you're 20-something and brave enough to want things. And you're not." She laughed quietly, but it wasn't really a laugh. "I'm 46. I'm someone's mom. Someone you know. Someone who should be telling you to meet girls your own age." She looked away, blinking slowly. "But here I am," she added, "sitting with you. Not walking inside." The sky dimmed, the first streetlight flickering on. She rubbed her arms like she suddenly felt cold. I didn't touch her, but I shifted closer, barely an inch. Something small cracked in her expression. "I don't know what you want from me," she whispered. I opened my mouth, unsure of my own answer. Before I could speak, she turned slightly, enough that her shoulder brushed mine. Not accidental, not quite intentional. A near confession in the shape of a touch. The moment stretched, dared us, held its breath. Then she asked, without looking at me, "And if I wanted something too, would that make us both foolish?" Her voice trembled on foolish. A question, a plea, a warning. And the night stayed perfectly still, waiting for one of us to break. I didn't text back right away. I kept staring at her message that night. The way the words didn't match the calm, practiced smile she wore at the cafe. "Can we talk tonight?" It felt too careful, like she'd rewritten it 3 times before hitting send. I finally replied, "I'm home." 10 minutes later, there was a light knock on my door. Not urgent, not hesitant, just controlled. When I opened it, she stood there in a loose sweater, hair down this time, eyes softer than they should have been at this hour. "Sorry if this is weird," she said. "It's not," I lied. She stepped inside, looking around like she remembered the space differently. She carried a small paper bag. "I brought tea. You always get the mint one, right?" She remembered that too. We sat at the tiny table shoved against the wall. She poured the tea into mismatched mugs, mine chipped, hers turning faintly green from the steam. For a while, she said nothing. She traced the rim with her finger. Another one of those micro habits that said more than her voice ever did. Finally, she said, "I used to drink this with Amir when he couldn't sleep." A small smile. He hated it. I tried to laugh, but it came out thin. "I didn't know that." "You didn't know a lot of things," she murmured. "I didn't either." She took a sip, winced at the heat. Then she glanced at me, quickly, like she wasn't supposed to. "Earlier today, I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable." "You didn't." She let the silence stretch. "It's just," she stopped. Restarted. "You remind me of someone I used to be close to." I felt something pull tight in my chest. "Is that a good thing?" She didn't answer immediately. She folded the napkin again. 2 neat lines, then a third. "Depends who you ask." A small personal truth, dropped gently like a pebble into water. She finally said, "I got married young." Too young. When it ended, I never felt seen again. Not really. Not in the small ways. I swallowed. And you feel seen now? Her eyes flicked up. Not a smile. Just an honesty she couldn't hold back fast enough. That's what scares me, she whispered. The room went still. Even the street noise outside felt quieter. My doubts rose in the spaces she didn't fill in. Why me? What does she want? What am I imagining? Thoughts that looped around themselves. She reached for my hand, but stopped just before touching it. The almost contact felt louder than actual touch. I don't know why that moment stayed with me, I said. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. She blinked slowly, like that landed somewhere she didn't expect. Then she stood, smoothing her sweater. I should go before I make this harder. At the door, she paused. She didn't hug me, didn't touch me, but her fingers brushed the door frame right next to my shoulder, close enough that the warmth from her hand grazed my skin. A gesture too small to name, but too heavy to ignore. Part 3. Heightening Suspense. 500 words. MLPOV. The next day, she avoided me. Not obviously. She wasn't that kind of person. But the small things shifted. She looked down first when we passed in the hallway, hurried her steps, pretended to be absorbed in her phone, as if last night had been something she needed to outrun. I tried to act normal too, but normal suddenly felt like a shirt I couldn't button right. By afternoon, I ended up at the cafe again. Habit or hope, I wasn't sure. I sat with my laptop open but untouched, tapping the same key every few seconds. Imagining what I'd say if she walked in. Imagining her never walking in again. Around 4 p.m., the bell over the door chimed. Not her, but someone close enough to make my pulse jump. It was Amir. He spotted me instantly. Bro, haven't seen you all week. I forced a smile. Yeah, busy. With what? He laughed. Then his eyes narrowed slightly. You look tired. Like, weird tired. My stomach tightened. Just work. He shrugged and ordered his drink, chatting like nothing mattered. But every second he sat there felt like he was standing on the edge of a landmine he didn't know existed. She walked in 20 minutes later, not looking for anyone, which somehow made everything worse. When she saw us, she hesitated. Just one step, barely noticeable, but I caught it. She tucked her hair behind her ear, steadied her expression, and approached. Hi, boys. Her voice was too bright, too arranged. Amir didn't notice anything, of course. Mom, didn't know you come here this late. I had errands. Even that pause was loaded. She sat beside him, not across from me, and I felt the distance like a physical thing. She kept her eyes on her hands, fidgeting with her bracelet. A quiet apology I wasn't sure was meant for me. When Amir went to the counter to grab napkins, she slipped a quick glance my way. You shouldn't look at me like that, she whispered. I'm not looking at you. You are. Her voice trembled just barely, like she wanted to hide the quake under the table. What do you want me to do? I asked. Pull back, she said. Before this becomes something we can't explain. Explain to who? To herself? To Amir? To the version of her that still felt married? None of the answers would have helped. When Amir returned, she shifted away a fraction of an inch. A fraction that felt like she was protecting all three of us. A few minutes later, she stood abruptly. I should go. But as she passed behind my chair, her fingers brushed the back of my shoulder, so lightly it could have been an accident. But it wasn't. It was a half-confession. Body language in a language only we spoke. When I turned, she held my gaze for a single breath. A near kiss from across the room. Then she left before either of us crossed a line we couldn't uncross. Part 4. Nearing the climax. 500 words. MLPOV. I found her 2 nights later sitting on the small bench outside our building, the one nobody ever used. She looked like she'd been there a while, elbows on her knees, hands clasped tight, like she was holding herself together physically. When she saw me, she didn't smile, didn't pretend, just exhaled. You were avoiding me, I said. I was trying. She rubbed her palms together. Didn't work. I sat beside her, not touching, but close enough to feel the chill off her skin. A faint tremble ran through her hand before she tucked it into her sleeve. What happened? I asked. She shook her head. Not here. Not really. Just life catching up. Another slow breath. My ex called today. Oh. I didn't answer, she added quickly. But hearing his name, it knocks things loose. Jealousy flickered inside me, small and ugly. Do you want to talk to him? No, she said it firmly, then softer. But it reminded me that I'm not free. She stared straight ahead, eyes unfocused. When you're with someone for so long, even when it ends, they leave shadows behind. And she cut herself off. What? I asked. I don't want to put my shadows on you. My throat tightened. Maybe I don't mind. You should. She turned her face toward me. Her eyes looked raw, almost too honest. Because I'm losing control around you. I don't know why. And it scares me. We sat in silence. Not the comfortable kind from before, but the kind that feels like a tightrope. She leaned back against the bench, staring up at the dim sky. You're Amir's age. I know. You're his friend. I know. You're kind. Too kind. I'm not that kind, I whispered. She looked at me then. Fully. Completely. A look that felt like both a confession and a plea. I shouldn't feel this, she said. But I do. And it's getting harder to hide. A beat, too. Her breathing hitched, barely noticeable. I moved my hand just slightly, so our knuckles brushed. The contact was small. Nothing, technically. But she inhaled sharply as if I'd touched a nerve. That's not helping, she whispered. Do you want me to stop? She didn't answer. Instead, she closed her eyes, just for a moment, like she was letting something dangerous through a crack she'd kept sealed for years. When she opened them, her voice was barely there. Why do you make me feel like this? I didn't know. I didn't have the right answer. Maybe there wasn't one. But she looked at me as if waiting for something. A move, a word, anything that would tip us over an edge we'd been inching toward since the cafe. I leaned in slightly, not enough to cross the line, but close enough for her to feel the question hanging between us. A question that neither of us dared put into words. Part 5. The twist, 500 words. MLPOV. The next morning, she disappeared. Not literally. Her car was in its usual spot. Lights turned on and off. But she didn't answer the door. Didn't respond to texts. Didn't appear in the hallway, the cafe, anywhere she usually existed. It was like she'd folded herself out of the world to avoid me. At first, I thought she just needed space. Then, by the second day, the silence felt deliberate. Not angry. Not cold. Just carefully measured distance. Like she was recalibrating her life without me in it. On the third day, Amir showed up at my place unexpectedly. Mom's been weird, he said. Quiet. Stressed. Did something happen? My chest tightened. With her? No. What? Dunno. He shrugged. My dad called her. First time in months. That name again. That shadow. I tried to keep my voice steady. Did she talk to him? Yeah, he said. For a while. My whole stomach dropped. He didn't notice. He just kept rambling about his classes, his phone, whatever. But his words were distant, muffled under the ringing in my ears. So she did pick up. That night, I walked past her door. Twice. 3 times. I didn't knock. My hand hovered above the wood, then dropped each time like my fingers forgot how to move. I imagined her inside, sitting on her couch, phone in hand, replaying that call. Maybe remembering things she'd tried to bury. Maybe wondering what she was doing getting close to someone my age when the past she thought was over suddenly knocked again. I told myself not to take it personally, that her silence wasn't about me. But the truth was simpler, sharper. Her pulling away hurt more than I expected. On the 5th day, I found something shoved into my mailbox, her handwriting on a folded note. Not a letter, not even a full sentence. Just, I'm sorry. I need time. Please don't wait for me. The ink smudged in one corner, like her hand shook while writing it. I sat on the stairs and read it 3 more times. It wasn't a goodbye, but it wasn't anything hopeful either. Just paused. Life paused. Later that night, I typed a message. I'm here if you want to talk. I didn't send it. I deleted it. Typed another. Did I do something wrong? Deleted that too. The final message I wrote stayed on the screen the longest. I miss you. In the end, I closed the chat without hitting send, watching the unsent text fade into the background like everything else between us. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused, like life forgot to finish the sentence. I didn't reply to her message for an hour. Not because I didn't want to, because I didn't trust myself to. When I finally said sure. Tonight, she responded almost too quickly. 8 p.m.? Outside. I walked out of my building at 7:50, pretending not to look for her. She was already there, leaning against her car, arms folded, hair loose this time. The street light above her flickered like it was trying to decide whether to stay on. You came, she said quietly. You asked, I replied. She laughed, nervous, softer than usual. Right. We ended up walking without deciding where. Just slow, unhurried steps past shuttered shops and parked motorcycles. She talked first. Do you remember when you used to come over for group study? Amir and the boys would be playing games, and you'd stay in the kitchen, pretending to read. That obvious? You watched the rain, she said. Every single time. I didn't know she remembered that. She paused near an old fruit stand, the metal shutter halfway down. She rested her hand on it lightly, like touching the past. Back then, I always thought you carried too much silence for someone so young. I shoved my hands into my pockets. Didn't want to bother anyone. You never bothered me. She said it in that half-whisper, half-admission way, like she was talking to herself more than me. Silence filled the space between us, familiar but heavier now. I watched her fingers tracing the edge of the shutter. Tiny movement, but tense. Maybe she didn't know it showed. What about you? She asked suddenly. Anything you don't say out loud? I swallowed. I sometimes write messages I don't send. To whom? To no one specific. I guess. And that was the closest truth I could manage. She nodded slowly. I do that too. She didn't explain further. I didn't ask. As we walked back, she touched my sleeve for 1 second. Barely a gesture, barely pressure, but my whole body noticed. She didn't seem to realize she'd done it until after, when her hand retreated in a small, guilty motion. When we reached my building, she stopped on the steps, looking everywhere except at me. You know, she said, tonight feels like one of those memories people don't admit meant something. What did it mean to you? I asked before I could stop myself. Her breath caught, just a small sound. More than I should say. Neither of us moved. The quiet stretched until she stepped back, tucking her hair behind her ear, an unnecessary gesture, her hair already in place. I don't know why that moment stayed with me, she said, eyes lowering. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. Then she squeezed my arm, light, brief, but loaded, and walked away before I could breathe again. Part 3. Heightening Suspense. 500 words. MLPOV. Kitako tone. The next couple of days were strange. Like the world continued, but my thoughts hadn't caught up. I kept replaying her tone, her touch on my sleeve, that unfinished sentence she walked away from. And yet, she didn't text. Not once. When I saw her again, it was accidental. Or maybe not. Hard to tell with her. I was leaving the coffee shop when she stepped in, almost bumping into me. Her eyes widened, too quickly for someone surprised. She recovered with a smile that didn't fully settle. Hey, she said. Hi. My voice was quieter than I expected. She looked around, as if checking who might be watching, even though the place was nearly empty. Then she stepped closer, not close enough to be obvious, but close enough that anyone paying attention would notice. You haven't been around, she said. I was giving you space. She blinked, caught off guard. Space? What? You seemed unsure that night. Her lips parted, but she didn't answer. Instead, she walked past me, heading toward the counter. I followed without meaning to. She ordered tea, but her voice wavered on mint, like even choosing a flavor felt like commitment. We sat, again without deciding to. She kept tapping her fingertip against the cup, tiny, uneven taps. I wanted to reach out and still her hand. Instead, I said, did I misunderstand something? She froze. Even her breathing paused. No, she said softly. You didn't misunderstand. Then, almost immediately, but maybe I did. That didn't make anything clearer. Before I could ask, the barista called out, Sarah, your sandwich is ready, louder than needed. She flinched at the volume, like she'd been caught doing something she shouldn't. Someone walked in behind me, a neighbor of hers, I thought. She stiffened instantly, sat straighter, pulled her hand back from where it had almost brushed mine. Maybe we shouldn't, she began. We aren't doing anything, I said. That's the problem, she whispered. The neighbor greeted her. She forced a normal smile. I watched the performance. The sudden polite distance, the careful posture. The version of her that didn't know me in the way she actually did. I felt something drop inside me. After the neighbor left, she exhaled shakily. I'm not avoiding you, she said. I'm trying not to want the wrong things. I leaned forward. What are the wrong things? Her eyes lifted slowly, searching my face. For one heavy second, we existed in the space between honesty and disaster. Her hand moved, just slightly, like she was reaching for mine. Then she stopped so close her fingers hovered above my skin. Don't, she whispered. Not here. But she didn't move away. We sat like that, almost touching, almost crossing a line neither of us would name, until the mint steam faded and the silence turned too warm. If she'd leaned in even halfway, I would have met her. She knew that. Maybe that's why she finally stood up. I'll see you, she said, but her voice wasn't certain at all. Part 4, Maximum Tension, 500 words. MLPOV, Kitako tone, 3 days. No contact. Not avoidance, something sharper. Something controlled. I saw her again by accident. If it was an accident, outside the grocery store. She was loading her back seat, shoulders tense. A carton slipped from her hand, rolling onto the pavement. I picked it up before she did. You okay? I asked. She didn't answer right away. Her jaw tightened like she was holding something in place. Fine, she said too quickly. Just tired. But the look she gave me said it wasn't tiredness. It was fear, or guilt, or both, tangled. Did I do something? I asked. Her breath hitched. You didn't do anything wrong. That doesn't mean nothing's wrong. She leaned against the car door, rubbing her forehead like she was trying to erase a thought. You're Amir's friend, she whispered. Yeah. I know. It should matter, she said, voice cracking. It didn't. Until it did. The air felt thick around us. Cars passed. Someone honked. But the world felt strangely muted, like we were enclosed in our own bubble of almost decisions. You think I haven't thought about this? She continued. About the age difference? About perception? The word perception came out like a blade she'd been hiding. I don't care what people think, I said. I do, she said. Because they think differently about women. Especially women like me. Divorced. Alone. Trying not to make another mistake. Her hands were shaking now. Not dramatically, just a small tremor in the fingers. I stepped closer, stopping just before our shadows touched. You aren't a mistake. She closed her eyes, like the words hurt and soothed at the same time. You shouldn't say things like that, she whispered. Why not? Because it makes me want to believe you. The honesty in her voice almost cracked something open in me. I leaned a little closer, not touching her, just close enough for her to feel the warmth. You think I don't feel the same? She exhaled, a long, trembling breath. I know you do. Her eyes opened, meeting mine. Raw, exposed. Like she'd stripped away every practiced calm she'd been holding. What are we doing? She asked, the question barely sound. I don't know, I admitted. She laughed, but it was a broken laugh. You're so young. You don't even see what this could cost me. I see what it's costing you already. That did something. She looked at me, really looked. No shields, no performance. A woman standing on the edge of something she'd spent years avoiding. Her hand lifted, hovering near my chest. She didn't touch me, just rested her palm a breath away, like testing if she could allow herself one more mistake. You make it hard to think straight, she whispered. Is that bad? It's dangerous. Her hand trembled closer. My heart kicked. Then she pulled it back. Fast, like the heat scared her. I can't, she said. But her eyes said maybe. Part 5. The twist, 500 words. MLPOV, Kitako tone, she disappeared. Not entirely. Just enough to make it feel deliberate. No grocery runs. No coffee shop. No late-night texts. Even her curtains stayed closed. At first, I told myself she was busy. But busy people don't cut off oxygen like this. On the 5th day, I bumped into Amir outside a pharmacy. He looked tired, annoyed, scrolling on his phone. You heard, he asked. Heard what? My mom's ex is back in town. The sentence hit me like a cold bucket of water. I kept my face neutral. Did she tell you? Nah. I overheard her on the phone. He shrugged. I think he wants to talk things through. Whatever that means. My stomach tightened. I walked home slower than usual, replaying every conversation I'd had with her. Every hesitation. Every almost touch. Every sentence she didn't finish. Her silence suddenly made sense. Later that night, I saw her outside, finally. Only because I happened to step onto my balcony at the same time she stepped onto hers. She was holding her phone, thumb trembling over the screen. She didn't see me at first. Her face was pale, strained. When she finally looked up, our eyes met. She froze. We didn't speak across the distance, just stared. Her lips parted like she wanted to say something. Then she shook her head lightly, whispered something I couldn't hear, and closed the balcony door. The sound echoed more than it should have. I sat on my bed, staring at my own phone. My fingers typed a message before I could think. Are you okay? I didn't send it. Deleted. Typed again. Deleted. My chest felt tight. Not heartbreak, not anger. Something worse. A kind of emotional limbo. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused. Like life forgot to finish the sentence. The next day, I walked past her house intentionally. Her car was there. Her shoes on the porch. A light on inside. She was home, but not present. I thought about knocking. Just a simple knock. Just to see her face. Just to let her know I wasn't disappearing even if her past was trying to reappear. I stood on her steps for a full minute. Then another. My hand lifted halfway. Stopped. This wasn't my place. Not now. Not when she was tangled in history she had never invited me into. I stepped back quietly. Left without knocking. Behind me, through the glass window, I saw her silhouette sitting at the dining table. Hands covering her face. She didn't see me. Or maybe she did. But neither of us moved. Part 6. The climax. 500 words. MALPOV. Kitako tone. It happened 3 nights later. Rain. Soft, steady, tapping the windows like someone trying to enter politely. I was making tea when I heard the knock. Not frantic. Not loud. Just hopeful. When I opened the door, she stood there drenched. Not from the rain, but from the weight in her expression. A jacket thrown loosely over her shoulders. Hair messy. Eyes tired in a way I hadn't seen before. Can I come in? She asked. Yeah, I said, stepping aside. She walked in slowly, like entering a memory she wasn't sure she had permission for. She didn't sit. Just stood near the kitchen counter, arms crossed, as if bracing herself. I'm sorry I disappeared, she said. You don't owe me. I do. She cut in, voice fragile but determined. I owed you honesty a long time ago. I stayed quiet. She breathed shakily. My ex showed up, she said. Not for me. For closure. Or guilt. Or boredom. I don't know. She rubbed her eyes. He doesn't want me back. I don't want him either. But when he came, I panicked. Because I realized how close I was to. She didn't finish. To what? I asked softly. Her voice broke. To wanting something I'm not allowed to want. The room felt very, very still. She looked up, eyes shimmering. You make me feel young. Stupidly young. Like I can start over. And that scares me. It scares me because I know better. I know the world won't be kind to someone like me wanting someone like you. I stepped closer, slow so she could pull away if she needed to. She didn't. I'm not asking for anything, I said. I know, she whispered. And that's why this feels so real. Her breath trembled as she looked at my hand resting on the counter, close to hers, but not touching. The air between our fingers vibrated with the weight of everything unsaid. I don't know how to do this, she whispered. Then don't decide everything tonight, I said. She shook her head, a soft, disbelieving laugh escaping. You talk like someone older than me. Maybe I just finally know what I want. Her eyes welled. For once, she didn't hide it. She reached out, slow, hesitant, and touched my wrist. Just a touch. Barely pressure. But real. The kind of touch that said I'm choosing this, even if I'm afraid. I missed you, she said. Not dramatic. Not rehearsed. Just honest. I'm here, I answered. She breathed out, like she'd been holding that breath for weeks, and leaned her forehead gently against my shoulder. Not a hug. Not a collapse. Just contact. Human. Quiet. Needed. We stayed like that, unmoving. No promises. No declarations. Just the kind of closeness that finally felt allowed. After a long moment, she whispered. Okay, then what now? Her question hung in the air, soft, trembling, real. And somehow, that simple, okay, felt like the start of everything. I didn't answer her text right away. I stared at it. Can we talk tonight? Until my thumb went numb. Eventually, I typed sure and hit send before I could think too much. She replied with only the address, her place. Not surprising. Still surprising. By the time I walked up her driveway at 7 p.m., the sky was already settling into that blue-gray that makes all houses look a little older, a little more tired. The porch light wasn't on, just a soft glow from her living room window. She opened the door before I knocked. You're on time, she said. She sounded relieved for some reason. I stepped inside. The room smelled like chamomile tea and something faintly citrus. Her hair was down, messy curls that looked like she'd been running her hands through them while thinking too much. She held a mug between both palms, like she needed the warmth. I didn't know if you'd actually come, she said. You asked, I replied. It came out simpler than I meant it. She gestured to the couch. I sat. She stayed standing a moment longer than necessary, like she was deciding something. Then she sat beside me, close enough that I could feel the heat from her leg, not close enough to pretend it meant anything. I didn't say what I meant this morning, she said. I waited. She took a breath. You remind me of someone I used to be. Or maybe someone I wish I'd known. She laughed a little, embarrassed by her own honesty. That sounds stupid. It doesn't, I said. Another pause. She wrapped her fingers tighter around the mug. When I was your age, she said quietly, I thought I'd have everything figured out by 40. Marriage, stability, confidence. Her eyes flicked toward mine. But life doesn't work like that. Her thumbs circled the rim of her mug. Slow. Nervous. I got divorced 3 years ago, she continued. There. That's the personal truth I promised myself I wouldn't say. You don't have to. I know, she said, cutting me gently off. But you should know who you're talking to. Something in my chest tightened. Not sympathy, something closer to recognition. I thought about the nights I stayed up scrolling through messages I never sent. The silence between me and my dad. The feeling of being both too young and too old at the same time. It's weird, I said. I never talk like this with people my age. Maybe they don't listen the same way, she murmured. We sat quietly for a moment. She took a sip of tea and winced. Too hot, she murmured. Without thinking, I reached for the mug to help steady it. My fingers brushed hers. Just a second, barely anything. But she froze. Not pulling away, not leaning in, just aware. I didn't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. She set the mug down slowly, deliberately, like placing something fragile on a shelf. You should go soon, she said softly, before this gets complicated. But her hand stayed on the mug a beat too long. And when I stood to leave, she touched my wrist, so lightly it could have been accidental. It wasn't. Her eyes held mine. That small, almost nothing gesture meant more than any confession could.